While America was busy debating whether renewable energy was the future, China was quietly building that future. And now, as Washington discovers the sobering reality of its green energy ambitions, it turns out we've simply traded one form of energy dependence for another, one that might be even more dangerous. Here's what most Americans don't realize. Every time we install a new solar panel on an American roof, every electric vehicle we proudly drive, and every wind turbine that spins in our heartland is strengthening China's grip on our national security. The data reveals a startling truth. While we've been focused on reducing our dependence on Middle Eastern oil, we've been handing over control of our energy future to Beijing. And unlike oil, which flows through pipelines we can see, this new dependence runs through supply chains so complex that most policymakers don't even understand how deep our vulnerability goes. China now controls over 80% of the global solar manufacturing supply chain, from the raw polysilicon to the finished panels that power American homes. In 2024, Chinese companies owned or controlled 39% of all solar manufacturing capacity operating on American soil, compared to just 24% for American-owned firms. Think about that for a moment. In our own country, Chinese companies have more manufacturing muscle in solar energy than American companies do. Meanwhile, American solar manufacturers are struggling to survive, with many facing bankruptcy due to Chinese price manipulation and massive state subsidies that our free market companies simply cannot match. The numbers get worse when you dig deeper into critical minerals. China processes 92% of the world's rare earth elements, 79% of graphite, and 65% of cobalt, all essential ingredients for the batteries, wind turbines, and solar panels that power America's green revolution. For gallium, a mineral critical to our most advanced military systems, China controls a staggering 98% of global processing. This isn't just about energy. It's about national defense. A recent Pentagon analysis found that 78% of American military weapon systems are vulnerable to Chinese supply chain disruptions, with over 43,000 different supply chains containing some level of Chinese dependence extending down to 6 tiers of suppliers. For American workers, this dependency creates a paradox that few politicians want to acknowledge. While China employed 7.4 million people in renewable energy sectors by 2024, nearly half of all global green energy jobs, the United States managed to create only about 1 million renewable energy positions. Chinese renewable energy workers outnumber American ones by more than 7 to 1. Even more troubling, Chinese-owned solar manufacturing plants in America are outperforming American-owned facilities, suggesting that even when green energy jobs come to American soil, they're increasingly controlled by Chinese companies with Chinese technology and Chinese supply chains. The strategic implications become crystal clear when you examine China's recent actions. In December 2024, Beijing banned exports to the United States of gallium, germanium, and antimony, materials essential for American military electronics, radar systems, and ammunition production. Just weeks later, China suspended exports of 6 heavy rare earth metals and rare earth magnets, choking off supplies to American automakers, aerospace manufacturers, and defense contractors. These weren't random trade disputes. They were calculated demonstrations of leverage. China was showing America that despite all our talk about energy independence, we'd simply created new dependencies that Beijing could weaponize at will. What makes this situation particularly dangerous is the timeline required to build alternatives. American efforts to create independent supply chains face a harsh reality. It takes 10 to 20 years to develop new mineral processing facilities from conception to operation. The Mountain Pass rare earth mine in California, which reopened specifically to reduce American dependence on China, still sent 98% of its raw materials to China for processing as recently as 2019. We can dig materials out of American soil, but we can't process them without Chinese facilities. That's not energy independence. That's an illusion of independence built on a foundation of Chinese control. The economic dimensions of this dependency reveal how China has turned America's green energy transition into a wealth transfer mechanism. The Inflation Reduction Act, designed to boost American clean energy manufacturing, has instead become a subsidy program for Chinese companies. Economic analysis shows that Chinese manufacturers could earn up to $125 billion in American tax credits under the legislation. American taxpayers are literally funding the Chinese companies that are outcompeting American firms and deepening our strategic vulnerabilities. For the American military, this dependency represents an unprecedented peacetime vulnerability. Modern weapon systems from F-35 fighter jets to Virginia-class submarines rely heavily on Chinese processed materials. The Pentagon has identified over 80,000 individual parts across 1,900 weapon systems that depend on Chinese supply chains. In practical terms, this means that in any serious conflict with China, Beijing could potentially cripple American military production simply by cutting off access to the materials our weapons require. Defense contractors are already reporting procurement delays and sourcing complications following China's recent export restrictions, offering a preview of how supply chain warfare might unfold in a crisis. The transportation sector amplifies this paradox. While America pushes electric vehicle adoption to reduce oil dependence, we're becoming increasingly reliant on Chinese battery technology and supply chains. China controls over 55% of global battery demand and dominates the processing of lithium and cobalt, essential for EV batteries. Every electric vehicle America produces requires materials and components that flow through Chinese-controlled supply chains, creating new vulnerabilities that offset the independence we gain from reduced oil consumption. American attempts to address these vulnerabilities face enormous challenges. The Pentagon has invested over $439 million toward building domestic supply chains since 2020 and recently took an equity stake in MP Materials, America's only rare earth mining company. However, building truly independent supply chains requires an estimated $700 billion in investment across Western nations and won't make meaningful impact until at least 2030. During this critical decade, American dependence on Chinese-controlled energy and defense supply chains will likely deepen, not diminish. The geographic concentration of alternative supply chains offers little comfort. Southeast Asian countries that serve as alternatives to direct Chinese imports, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, and Cambodia, often house facilities with significant Chinese ownership or technical dependence. In 2022, approximately 77% of American solar panel imports came from these four countries, but many of these facilities rely on Chinese technology, financing, and supply chains. America has essentially diversified the geography of its imports while maintaining the underlying dependency on Chinese control. China's strategy extends beyond simple market dominance to encompass what experts call mineral diplomacy. Through state-backed financing, Chinese entities have acquired stakes in approximately 75% of nickel production in processing giant Indonesia. Between 2000 and 2021, Beijing provided nearly $57 billion in aid and subsidized credit for mineral operations in developing countries, typically securing long-term access to materials through joint ventures and offtake agreements. This approach ensures Chinese control over materials throughout the global supply chain, not just within Chinese borders. The employment implications paint a stark picture for American workers. While American politicians promise that green energy will create good-paying jobs, Chinese dominance means many of these opportunities are being captured by Chinese-owned facilities operating in America or by Chinese companies abroad. American manufacturing employment in solar and wind sectors totals approximately 300,000 workers, while China employs 3.5 million people in renewable energy manufacturing. Even when green energy facilities are built in America, they often rely on Chinese-made components and Chinese technical expertise, limiting the value that remains in American communities. Recent policy responses reveal the depth of American recognition of this problem, but also the limited effectiveness of current approaches. The Biden administration imposed gradual tariff increases on Chinese solar cells and electric vehicle battery packs, while the Trump administration launched Section 232 investigations into polysilicon and derivative products. However, these defensive measures cannot address the fundamental reality that China has built integrated supply chains spanning from raw material extraction to finished product manufacturing, creating cost advantages and technical capabilities that American companies operating under market conditions cannot easily replicate. The nuclear energy sector illustrates how China's strategy extends across all energy technologies. China currently has 31 nuclear reactors under construction, almost as many as the rest of the world combined, while American reactor construction has largely stalled. In nuclear fuel supply chains, China is gaining influence in uranium enrichment and processing, creating potential future dependencies in America's most secure energy technology. The pattern repeats across every energy sector. As America pursues energy diversification for security reasons, China systematically builds dominance in the supply chains that power that diversification. So here's the uncomfortable question that American policymakers do not want to answer. What happens to American energy security when our green energy transition depends entirely on a strategic rival's supply chains, manufacturing capacity, and processing facilities? We've spent decades worried about Middle Eastern oil choke points, but we've created something potentially worse, a comprehensive dependency on Chinese-controlled supply chains that span every technology we need for energy independence. Unlike oil, which comes from multiple suppliers and flows through infrastructure we can see and protect, our new energy dependencies run through Chinese-controlled networks that we barely understand and definitely cannot secure. The irony is profound. In our rush to achieve energy independence through renewable technology, we've created energy dependencies that are deeper, more complex, and potentially more dangerous than anything we faced in the oil age. China didn't just participate in America's green energy transition. They structured it to ensure our dependence on their systems would grow stronger with every wind turbine installed and every electric vehicle sold. The more successful America's renewable energy policies become, the more we strengthen Chinese control over our energy future. Is this the kind of energy independence America should celebrate, or should we be asking much harder questions about whether we've simply traded visible dependencies for invisible ones that could prove far more costly when they are inevitably weaponized?